Two cities, two post offices, two different results. Tonight, NBC5 investigates, tests the U.S. Postal Service again, and finds mail sent from one side of the Metroplex arrived faster than the other. Senior investigative reporter Scott Friedman looks at the latest results tonight as we continue to monitor mail service ahead of the November election, when millions will vote by mail.
They sit 30 miles apart, but Dallas and Fort Worth seemed like opposite ends of the country in our most recent mail test. And what happened to letters we sent from one side of the Metroplex has one mail service expert wondering what's happening inside a local post office.
That sounds like a post office that has an issue.
But first, let's explain our experiment. Back in August, NBC5 Investigates sent letters from a post office in Dallas to locations across DFW and to our friends at other NBC stations nationwide. They sent us letters too, more than 150 in all. About 88% arrived within the 1 to 3 business days the post office promises between most major cities. So what would happen when we expanded our test in September? Addressing even more letters, sending them to and from more places.
Round 2. I've got my 24 letters, and I'll be mailing them from a post office here in Dallas.
And I'm in Fort Worth, mailing 24 letters to the same destinations. Let's see how long it takes. The answer? A big difference between the Big D and Cowtown. The letters we sent from a mailbox outside the post office on 8th Avenue in Fort Worth, 96% arrived on time in 1 to 3 business days. But our letters sent the same day from a box at the Brook Hollow Post Office on Norwood Road in Dallas, 0 arrived on time. From Fort Worth, mail took only 2 business days to reach Chicago, Los Angeles, and New York. From Dallas, 6 business days to Chicago, 5 to LA and New York. Even letters sent from Dallas to another Dallas address and to Grand Prairie took 5 business days. And when our Dallas letters arrived at their destinations, we saw something odd. They were not postmarked until the 14th, even though they were mailed on the 11th.
That really shouldn't be the case. Something went wrong there. That's something we very rarely see.
Dave Lewis is with Snailworks, a company that electronically tracks a lot more mail than we did, 10 to 20 million pieces every day for clients across the country. He says letters should be moved to a sorting facility and postmarked the same day.
If one of my customers had that experience, I'd call the postmaster or the manager of that office and ask what was going on and explain the problem to them, because it sounds like they've got a process problem somewhere.
We contacted the Postal Service. A Dallas spokesman declined to answer questions about why it took days to postmark our letters. Instead, he told us the Postal Service cannot substantiate that your test represents a reasonable approximation of election mail, and that the agency is committed to delivering election mail in a timely manner. But a Postal Service audit in August suggests postmark issues may be a wider problem. The agency's Inspector General found about 4,200 election ballots did not receive a postmark at all in a recent New York state election. Texas is one of 21 states where a missing or late postmark could get your absentee ballot tossed out. The state will accept absentee ballots up to 1 day after the election, but only if postmarked by Election Day. Dave Lewis anticipates some isolated election issues, but believes most voters will be fine.
I'm like the Valium of mail right now. I'm just trying to keep people calm. Things are pretty much normal right now.
His company's stats show more mail is running late, but only about a half to 1 day behind normal. In our latest nationwide test, our NBC stations sent each other more than 400 pieces of first-class mail on September 11th. 88% arrived in 1 to 3 days, 98% within a week. The Postal Service's own stats show 88% on-time arrival in September. And to some in Washington, that's not bad.
There was a slight dip in service, but currently in terms of first-class mail, we're only down a couple percentage points in terms of on-time delivery from a little over 90% to just under 90%.
I think a very, very high percentage of the ballots that are mailed within a reasonable time frame, and even some that are mailed outside of a reasonable time frame, will be delivered.
But if you're waiting for something like a prescription, an extra day or two might be a bigger problem.
If you're on a fixed income and you're waiting for your check to come in the mail so you can pay your bills, a delay of a few days may cause you to have a late fee that you can't afford. I mean, there's really real-world consequences behind this.
Dallas Congressman Colin Allred says he's hearing complaints from constituents, including veterans, who rely on the mail for medication. And those troubles could linger beyond November without more action to help the cash-strapped Postal Service.
I think that people expect that if they do their part, that the mail will do its part. And we have to make sure that happens.
Really interesting. We do these experiments. We never know how they're going to turn out, right? So how does the Postal Service rate its own performance?
Well, Brian, they say it's improving. They say that the numbers in September have been better than what they saw in August, slightly better. And they say they're working on more improvements in places like Chicago, where it took twice as long as it should have for our letter from Dallas to arrive.
Now, this issue of letters not being postmarked on the day they go into the mail slot, that could be a real problem for mail-in ballots, right?
A real problem. And you know what? It wasn't just Dallas where we saw problems with postmarks. Take a look at a letter that we sent from Fort Worth. We have a graphic, I think, to show that. It had no stamp postmark on it at all when it arrived. Instead, you can see the stamp was crossed out with a red marker, and there's another red mark above the address. We asked the Postal Service what that means and why that letter wasn't postmarked. Again, they would not answer that question, Brian.
Interesting. All right. Important issue, especially right now. Thank you, Scott.